Parece até que o destino uniu-se com você só pra me maltratar. E cada dia que passa é mais uma tormenta que eu deixei ficar.
When most people think of Brazil, they think of samba music, carnival.
Samba de Janeiro.
Beaches.
We will fly on a beautiful plane to our beautiful country so you can lie on a beautiful beach. A beach. Brazil. The only thing we will steal is your heart.
And soccer.
There is a side of Brazil that is historically invisible.
You may think that indigenous removal in Brazil is a thing of the past.
But it's not.
Seizing lands from indigenous groups has been deeply rooted in Brazil's history, the history of the entire Americas, and the history of the world.
In Brazil, the indigenous have endured 100 years of land violation and degradation. Before Portuguese colonization in the 16th century, the current territory of Brazil had over an estimated 2,000 nations and tribes. In the 1970s, few tribes remained, and the total indigenous population was only 120,000 people.
Today, only 70,000 of these people remain.
The indigenous have been struggling to maintain their cultural traditions and ways of life. They traditionally rely on the Amazon rainforest for their livelihoods. They have strong cultural ties to the rainforest, rooted in their cultural identities.
Beyond being home to thousands of indigenous people and populations, the Amazon provides a plethora of natural services. It is home to an innumerable number of plants and wildlife, mitigates global warming by reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and cycles water for the region.
But the global economy has not assigned monetary values to these services.
Due to the industrialization and deforestation in the region for the past 40 years, over 20% of the forest has been destroyed.
And in the time it takes for you to watch the rest of this video, an area larger than 200 football fields will be gone forever.
The Brazilian government is, through its growth acceleration plan, is setting its sights on essentially making the Amazon investment grade, bringing companies in to exploit the natural resources of the Amazon, be it hydroelectric dams or timber exploitation or cattle ranching. And indigenous people are clearly in harm's way. I think we're going to see a lot of conflicts. Virtually every hydroelectric project or road project in the Amazon is going to involve direct conflicts between the government and indigenous people, and this is only going to increase as the push for development moves forward.
The indigenous populations have no rights to govern themselves.
They have no rights to own land.
They can occupy it.
But they can't own the land they have been historically tied to for thousands of years.
Every day, they are vulnerable to corporations and the Brazilian government seizing more of their land for economic development purposes.
They have no access to Brazilian courts.
Their only access to the government is through an organization called Fundação Nacional do Índio, or the National Indian Foundation.
The main goal of this organization is to assimilate rather than to protect their rich historic tradition.
The Ministry of Justice has the ultimate power over land disputes, making it a political decision. In fact, the Brazilian government considers the indigenous status to be temporary, and complete assimilation into Brazilian society to be the goal. The National Integration Plan for the Indigenous was created in the inaugural stages of the development of the Amazon on a large scale.
Instead of protecting the indigenous culture and way of life, the plan sought to move them so the government could gain economic benefits from their land.
As global climates and economies change, companies become increasingly interested in the resources within the forest, and the rights of the indigenous peoples are lightly considered.
Corporations are building on thousands of miles of lands for economic gain and displacing thousands of people.
All while the government of Brazil turns a blind eye. Brazil is a member of the United Nations and has signed the UN Human Rights Agreement.
According to the agreement, every participant is expected to maintain, quote, the right of priority for the indigenous lands they have been using and ensure the participation of indigenous people in land management and environmental protection.
But in the Amazon, we can see the opposite is true.
There are plans to build 7 dams on the Zinga and Madeira rivers.
With these dams come other industrialization projects in the region, including roads, power lines, oil and gas pipelines, and large-scale mining.
The dams will provide energy to nearby areas and people that will make it easier to export to China.
But they will also devastate the surrounding area.
They will disturb both aquatic and terrestrial biodiversity.
Directly displace 25,000 indigenous people.
And threaten 18 ethnic groups. They will leave certain areas in droughts and other areas flooded, further wreaking havoc on the surrounding ecosystems.
Millions of acres of floods will further displace over 40,000 people.
That is the number of people that attend the University of Maryland.
And it is the number of people that will be left with little or no compensation.
Aqui agora que nós somos indígenas para contra pelo monte, para mandar de paralisar.
E sim, poderá trazer muita desgraça, um custo muito alto, porque nossas comunidades também vivem sofrendo.
Então, o objetivo aqui hoje é que alguém do governo venha aqui anunciar a paralisação desse empreendimento que só está causando morte para os povos da Bacia do Xingu.
When indigenous tribes and peoples are relocated, their chances of surviving off a different section of the rainforest are very low.
Oftentimes, they move to urban settings because they have no choice for jobs or the rural lands are becoming urbanized.
And when they choose to assimilate, they do not easily adapt in modern society,
leaving them impoverished and with nothing.
Many experts and government administrators are against building these dams. Many say it is wrong and cite the 1988 Constitution of Brazil and the UN Human Rights Agreement that we have quoted earlier.
Indigenous people that are affected say they are willing to physically fight against it if a peaceful negotiation is not sorted out.
But major corporations and the government consider the monetary value of this forest too high.
The government attempts to buy out the indigenous people by threatening them with withdrawal of social services they are provided.
This usually gets them to back off.
National reserves are created for the indigenous people, but only where the government does not need the land.
Laws that attempt to protect the indigenous population are not widely known, and they are seldom enforced or held up in court proceedings.
Political processes that are motivated by corporate interests continue to threaten their traditional environment,
their lifestyle,
their economy,
and their indigenous activities.
This is a serious issue that involves the fact that the civil rights of indigenous Brazilians is not protected, and it is not typically what people think of when they consider Brazil, but it is a profound human rights concern.
Parece até que o destino uniu-se com você só pra me maltratar. E cada dia que passa é mais uma tormenta que eu deixei ficar. Nosso viver não adianta.